Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Glory be to Jesus Christ. Now we come to the part in the Lord's Prayer and in our discussion on the Lord's Prayer that I ask you to give it your utmost attention, because now we've been going through the Lord's Prayer, we've been studying it, we've contemplated upon it, and it's going to get even more difficult as we get deeper into it. And I stress this at this particular point because the next two words are a little challenging to us, or at least they should be if we're really following along closely to the Lord's Prayer and if we're truly thinking on the words. Because as we've discussed, we've gone over our Father and how Jesus is teaching us that that name is holy and sacred and how it is a name to be venerated, to love. He's led us up to the heights of heaven. He's told us to contemplate on uniting ourselves to God's heart, to his will. Now, in the next two words, he brings us back down. He says, on earth. And that's the only two words we're going to focus on today, those two words, on earth. Because we have a lot of misconceptions about the earth. And I'd like to say they're new misconceptions, but they're not. These are ones that have been going on since man first learned how to talk, man first learned how to write, man first learned to think, philosophize, whatever you want to say. We've all struggled with just what exactly is the earth. Unfortunately, we have a very clear, concise teaching in Christianity, but unfortunately, we muddle it up. Because a lot of times we get caught in what's called either materialism, and that one we can pretty much reject for most of us being Christians, because that's kind of the thought process that at some point that progress is going to lead us to some sort of earthly paradise. That we're going to get enough technology, enough know-how, that all the information we need is going to come fast enough, that it's going to be right there at the touch of our fingers, that we're going to have no issues whatsoever, and that eventually paradise will find itself on earth because of the scientific advancements we will make. I hate to tell you this, but I think most Christians find it pretty easy to reject that because it's still man in control of science. And as long as man lacks morality or struggles with morality or chooses to ignore his morality, then he is going to use progress for reasons other than the benefit of mankind. It is just that simple. We get to the point where we have all the information we really could probably ever use right now. We don't need to get it much faster. And yet many times we use that information to argue, to fight, to come up with conspiracy theories. I mean, I don't know. We got a whole lot of things we use that information for other than to enrich our knowledge and to broaden our minds. Think of what we really use the internet for half the time, and we'll know what we really are doing with these great technological advancements. The same factories and chemicals and scientists who give us cure for diseases can weaponize viruses and create problems for mankind. We will never get to that point as long as man continues to struggle with being a man. So materialism for most Christians, other than a few, should probably be pretty easy to cast aside. Then we have the opposite problem, and this is the one I find most often in Christianity. It's where we go around saying, the world is evil. Matter is evil. Everything that's created is evil. It's a wicked, wicked world. If you hold on to this thought, I beg you, cast it out. The world is not evil. The world is not wicked. The world was not created to be bad. This is a heresy long ago dealt with by the Orthodox fathers, but it creeps back into our Christian thinking for some reason. We don't look to the past to learn and to be enriched by it because many times those in the past can teach us. Actually, education is a wonderful thing in that regard when we look at the past because it's a free commerce, basically. We learn from people who've already experienced this if we really look to the past to teach us. They dealt with that. That was the ancient Greeks' philosophy, that matter was evil. And that's why the soul was trapped in matter. That everything was evil, that the world itself was evil because men were evil. This is not Christianity. And this specifically is not Orthodox Christianity. If you say the world is evil, I will encourage you to stop here now because you are committing a great heresy. And you're doing yourself no benefit at this point by declaring the world to be evil. The world is fallen. The world is corrupted. The world has issues. Most of these issues come from man. However, when we talk about nature and its mortality, that's because of us. That's because we fell, and this is actually in God's mercy. And that may sound strange to us, that we say, well, the world lost its former glory because we lost our former glory. But we could not learn to live in a world as corruptible men and women, as those who will pass away, as those who still hold on to but a fleeting image of God's glory, in a nature, in a world where it still withheld all of God's glory. First, the ancient pagans had no problem with nature worship as it is, but imagine if all of nature shone with the glory of God. Imagine if it never got old, never died, never witnessed decay, never had problems. How much more would man turn to nature and worship it as a god and turn away from God? Not seeing the source of the glory, but rather seeing nature in the glory. The ancient pagans would have had no problem with worshiping that. And us as modern people, we have a problem with envy now. We see people who have more than us, who we think are better lifestyles than us. We have whole social media networks dedicated to it, just so we can watch how the better half lives. And we're fueling our envy of people who will grow old, who will go gray, who will face diseases, who will die. How much worse would it be for us if we looked out upon a world which had none of that? We would come to hate this world. Even in its ultimate goodness, we would declare it to be the worst sin possible. God in his mercy gave corruptible man a corruptible world so that we could learn it. And this is what brings us to those two words, on earth. This is where we begin to unite ourselves to God's will. This is where we begin the process. You cannot put it off for a future date. You cannot say, I'll try and do it in paradise. You cannot say, I want to get to a halfway point. And believe me, when I was growing up as a Roman Catholic, I loved the thought of purgatory, honestly. I didn't have to be too good. I didn't have to be too bad. If I just hit that mark, I could find my way out of purgatory. It was in there. Dante wrote about it. I could ascend those levels. There wasn't an exit at some point. That is not what we are put on this world to do. Christ tells us, he brings us back crashing down to the world and says, on earth you must unite. Thy will be done on earth. You must seek to strive God's will to unite yourself to God here and now. Right here, right now, in the present. Not in the future, not that we did in the past. We must strive to unite ourselves here. To bring forth God's will to us, to learn to do God's will, to unite ourselves to the heart of the Father. This should terrify us in those cases. Why? Because we're comfortable with saying, I'll do it another day. We're comfortable with saying, I'll get to it at some point. We're comfortable with saying, you know what? It's good there is a heaven, and it's good there is a God. But I live in a bad world. But it's in this very bad world we must begin to take those first steps. So let us not make excuses. Let us not seek for another day. Let us begin today, this very day, to understand that we must seek to do God's will, to seek to unite ourselves with his heart, to let his desire be our desire. And what is his desire? That you come to know his Son, Jesus Christ, that you come to love one another as he loved you, and that you come to love your neighbor as yourself. The blessing of the Lord be upon you through his grace and love from God, now and ever the age of ages. Amen.